You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. My name is Neil Ward and I'm joined by Ben Emlyn-Jones. First of all, Ben, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Neil. It's good to be back on the show. We've done some great shows in the past and I'm looking forward to another one.
Excellent. And you've been away for the past few months doing all sorts of things, heading to the north, heading to London, everywhere, in fact, haven't you?
Oh, yes. In fact, I've done in the last 2 weeks, I've done 2 trips. I seem to be a bit of a guy who's always on tour. On the week before last, I went to Weird Weekend North. This is a conference in Cheshire at a place called Rixton with Glazebrook, which is actually a very nice little village just outside Warrington. And this is a weekend-long event, and it was excellent. There was numerous speakers speaking on a wide variety of subjects. And I had a great time, met up with some friends, had a great time, good social life. Some things were a bit unexpected. For example, we had a medical emergency on the second day, which was okay. I mean, I ended up going to hospital with somebody who'd become ill, and I had to help get her to hospital. So I had to ride in an ambulance into Warrington to the hospital. But yeah, she was fine. She was discharged a few hours later. Now, last Saturday, this is the Saturday,
the conference.
Yeah, so we did miss the last afternoon of the conference, unfortunately, which was a pity. We're now speaking in late April. The last Saturday, that's the third Saturday of April, I went to London to an event called Strange Central, which was organised by the London Fortean Society, which was similar to Weird Weekend North. It was just one day, but it hosted a number of speakers on, again, a wide variety of subjects: UFOs, ghost hunting, Bigfoot, cryptozoology, things like that, ancient mysteries. I'm being a bit of a jack of all trades. I can enjoy all of them, but I know some people may specialize in one particular field, and there was something for everyone there, really. Again, it was a great event. Met up with some friends, caught up with old times, and I really like this. There's a written report of Strange Central actually on her Panamo Voice blog, if anyone wants to check that out, panamo-voice.blogspot.com. And pretty soon on her Panamo Radio, her panamo-radio.blogspot.com, there will be an audio diary of my trip to Weird Weekend North. That's coming soon.
Excellent. Well done. We look forward to seeing more material as it emerges from you. And we do have our returning guests this evening. So we have from the United States, Portland in the United States. Now, Ben, you've been to Portland in the UK because it's just over the road from where I live in Weymouth. So Stephen has the privilege of living in Portland in the United States, which is an interesting thing. He's lived there before. So welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show, Stephen Sakellerios.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me back.
Thank you. Now, Stephen and I have been talking recently over email about various things, aspects of the afterlife, and we thought it'd be an interesting thing to discuss this film that we've both watched, and we thought was interesting. And it was called The Astral City, if I'm not mistaken, and it's on the Gaia TV channel, but also I believe you can watch it on YouTube. There are various quality variations of it on YouTube. The kind of, not a downside, I suppose, but if you can put up with it, it's actually in Portuguese from Brazil because that's where the film was made. So they do have subtitles. You have to kind of keep reading the subtitles, which for some people can be distracting. If you want to watch the wondrous scenes of the film, you still have to keep reading the text below. But Stephen, you've obviously come across this kind of material before in books and things that you've read. And this is the first time you've seen this film, the Astral City. So it's a depiction of the afterlife from the Portuguese medium, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't have the closed captioning on when I started. And I just thought everybody in heaven spoke this very strange language that I could kind of catch a little bit. Then I realized, no, wait a minute, I can put the closed captioning on. But yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. I've watched foreign films that have captioning, and you forget about it after a while, because you've got the emotion and everything, so it's just natural. Yeah. I thought it was a good film. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
So it was based on the channel writings of a medium, though, a Portuguese story, Brazilian medium, wasn't it? And I forget the name of the chap now.
Chico Xavier, yeah. And he apparently channeled a bunch of novels, and this was one of them. So they turned this one into a film. That's what it said at the end. It gave you like.
I did see that, and I assume that's what they were talking about, based upon the writings of medium such and such. Now, was this then a true story, or was it just a story concocted by the spirit world to entertain us but educate us at the same time, or did it really happen to someone that died?
Well, we don't know. I took it as being real, but you picked up a lot of little incongruities that I kind of glossed over, But what I do understand is that the astral world is very subjective. In other words, that you project out of your own mind, whatever the reality is. So if you want a big city, like what they depicted in this film was a very clean, very modern looking big city with lots of open spaces. And, if that's what you gravitate towards and have always imagined it would be the ideal thing for you, I think that's where you'll end up with other people that have the same interests, whereas if you want to be out in the country somewhere, you'll find people that want to be out in the country, growing their own vegetables or whatever. So it's very subjective, and it's hard to say that this is realistic and this is unrealistic, because it might be realistic for them personally,
I must admit, I've not actually seen this film. However, I've just been reading the Wikipedia page, so sorry for this rather amateurish attempt at research here. But I have heard of Chico Xavier. I know he's a very, very famous medium in Brazil, and there's a big spiritualist scene in Brazil, actually, which has come into conflict with the church and some of the more radical elements of it. This has even led to violence and murder. But this is an award-winning film. And it's Astral City, A Spiritual Journey. It's known as Nosso Lar. It's its original title, and this is Portuguese, just means our home. And it's Philip Glass has composed the soundtrack. He does a lot of Philip Glass does like soundtracks for several films, especially with this theme. There was a film called Lovely Bones, which is actually quite a horror film. Actually, it's
Peter Jackson film.
Yeah, it's actually it for some reason has a PG certificate. I don't know why, because it's about a serial killer that targets young girls. But Philip, again, it has this theme of spirituality, the afterlife, things like that. And Philip Glass did the soundtrack for that, which is quite well. No, sorry, that was Paulino. Pardon me. But Neil.
It's an interesting film, though. If you get the chance to watch it, and I recommend anyone that's interested in mediumship, spiritualism, or spiritism as they call it in Brazil, in South America, an interesting designation. I'm not sure what the difference is between spiritism and spiritualism. Does anyone know?
I don't know. Do you,
Stephen? Different branding, I think.
I know that I know that in Brazil there's a big. See, Brazil is, I suppose, different from where I live, because it's an ancient nation that goes back thousands of years. But there's the Western settlers, Western colonialism, and things like this. So European colonists came over. This is why they speak Portuguese there. The people racially are a kind of mixture of indigenous and those who have come over either as slaves from Africa or as European Portuguese and other nations of Europe. So it's very, very a mixture in terms of it's a lot of culture, a lot of different cultures and people have come in to make in modern Brazil. But there is a very ancient tradition of spirituality there, which includes communing with ancestors. This does involve the consumption of drugs of various kinds, which is illegal It has a religious exemption in Brazil. And so I suppose spiritualism, in a sense, would find a fertile ground for developing in Brazil, I imagine, because it's kind of like, contrary to popular belief, it didn't just begin in with the Fox sisters. It goes back much further. It goes back because we have our own traditions here in Europe, which when it comes to that, to the communion, the joining of the material and the spiritual worlds. So that's just me speculating there. I don't know specifically, but I do know a little bit about the spiritualist world of Brazil. I've learned a little bit about it.
Well, the film begins with an earthly doctor, if you want a kind of basic synopsis, based in Brazil. And whilst he's not evil or anything like that, he seems to be a bit selfish, maybe. But he tends to his patients and things, and he actually passes over, dies of you're not quite sure what it is. I wonder if it's like an appendicitis or something. But he doesn't make it through the operation. He dies, and he wakes up in this what some people call the dark regions of the spirit world, or the lower astral realm, or something like that, which is a very dark place, almost like a World War One scenario where all sorts of bad things are happening, and there's lots of other people that are kind of living torturous lives on there, moaning and groaning as if they're suffering in some kind of self-made hell. And there's no grass there; it just seems to be mud. Everyone's covered in mud and dirt and filth, and he's kind of injured as well from his earthly injuries. They still seem to be visible on his body, and there's people that try and get him, and they seem to suggest that he's committed suicide. He's committed a really bad sin, and they say, "You've committed suicide. You're not wanted here," or words to that effect. And eventually, he finds this too much, and he sees these sort of celestial beings go and pick up people now and again, and he wonders who they are. So he kind of sort of just prays to someone, a saint, a god, someone to relieve him of this kind of mental environment that he's found himself in. And eventually his prayers are heard, and 3 people from the higher realms of the spirit world, which turns out to be this Astral City, come down and rescue him. But this is where it starts going a bit strange, is that they turn up with a stretcher, like you would in a kind of a war environment, put an injured person on a stretcher. And it's roughly in the 30s, I think, actually, because they do mention the Second World War erupts on Earth as they're in the spirit world, and they welcome lots of people later onto the spirit world from the results of the Second World War. So I put the beginning of the film in maybe the late 20s, early 30s. And so they take him to this stretcher, and they dissolve and then appear at the kind of pearly gates, if you like, to this city. And they carry him on this stretcher through this, it's almost like castle gates, into this wondrous city. And you see like the earth below, as if they're literally on some location above Earth. And it's sort of, maybe where the moon would be looking down on Earth or something. And they see these stars and things. And then they come into this wondrous city. And yet when you're in the city, I mean, I like to pick holes in films, and it's my fault, really. It's that whilst they're carrying them on a stretcher, as soon as they're inside the city, the stretcher becomes like anti-gravity, and it sort of floats along by itself. Did you notice that, Stephen? Did you spot the difference?
No, you caught a lot of details that I didn't. And I was still trying to figure out the language at that point, I think. But yeah, they brought him into a hospital, and it was a very kind of nice but conventional looking hospital, And I mean, I suspended disbelief on a lot of that stuff. I said, well, maybe it's symbolic, but I've never read anywhere that they bring you in on a stretcher. I mean, that's news to me.
I must say, because I was a hospital porter for 23 years, I expect that's well, seeing as I was a hospital porter for 23 years, when my time comes, I'm sure I'll end up there. It's interesting how what you described there, where the environment changes and objects change. This is reminiscent of Richard Matheson's What Dreams May Come. Now, there's a very well-known film with Robin Williams by Vincent Ward, which is about that. It's worth reading the original book, though, because you get a lot of descriptions in the book you don't get in the film, even though the two are quite faithful, and the film is quite an accurate adaptation. For example, when they leave the heavenly area and they go into hell, because Chris, the guy who dies, has to rescue his wife from hell. You get this big change, and it's somewhat, I think, based on Dante's Divine Comedy, which describes the different parts of the afterlife. It's a very, very vivid and quite dramatic description. I mean, Inferno in particular is probably the most famous, and everything changes, including people's internal thoughts and feelings, the sensation of weight, and indeed, some things could go from being like a physical old-fashioned thing to being sort of modern, future, and anti-gravitic. So that fits with the fact that objects change. Nothing is solid as it is in the living world, and even matter itself, as in the form it takes in this world, is alterable. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, you get the same themes, I think, in different sources. Basically, the idea comes through that matter is changeable and that it's amenable to mental thoughts and mental force and so on. So, you know, a lot of the same ideas. Now that wife had committed suicide in that story, correct?
She did, yeah.
Yeah.
She did. Following the deaths of the children, she died. She took her own life, and her husband, she took her own life, yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed that's in common with that film and this one is that the people who are stuck in that place, they're so self-absorbed that they're not amenable to help. In other words, there are people that could come and help them, but they actually don't want the help. You know, they haven't turned to get the help. They're kind of all, and that happened when the people in the city, in the higher realm, came down to get the doctor. There were other people there, but they didn't want it, you know.
Yeah, this idea that you know, in a sense, our experience in the afterlife realms is essentially determined by our own thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Yeah, but it is a recurring theme. It's a recurring element of not just fiction, but the possibly quite real psychical research that it's based on. Because Richard Matheson actually said in his book, he said that this is all based on what I've learned. It's all based on factual stuff that I've picked up. And Richard Matheson was very interested in this sort of thing. He wrote a lot of fiction, weird fiction, spooky fiction, stuff like that, based on this sort of thing.
Now, in the film that Neil and I watched, the doctor gradually went through
that film. Sorry.
I was going to say the doctor went through a kind of a personal transformation, didn't he? He started out kind of like he was, but then gradually he began to soften and be more concerned about other people and so forth.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, he started to try and heal people when they were brought into this hospital. The hospital was a very strange kind of building. It looked like almost like the dungeons of a cellar or of a castle, a bit dark and murky. And at some point, he offers to try and help clean the place up, and he's actually there with a sweeping up the dust in this hospital building. And it's like, hang on a minute. There's dust in this Astral City. Surely it's an Astral City with higher vibrational fields and everything's nice and heavenly and fantastic. What's dust doing there? Dust is a representation of breakdown of matter or something. So
I think it was like,
I think they kind of got that wrong, in my opinion.
Are you familiar with the Charlie Brown series that was done here? They have a character named Pigpen. And
good old Charlie Brown.
He had his own dust. You know,
it's weird.
I brought his own dust.
This is weird.
Smelly guy,
yeah. I was thinking about that today. I was just thinking about that cartoon because I loved that when I was a kid. I just loved that cartoon series when I was a kid about those the boys and girls at this school, Charlie and there's Linus and Lucy and these little kids. They're great. And there was this very dirty kid who used to, wherever he moved, there was a cloud of dust around him. He never used to bathe. And I was, funny enough, I haven't thought of that for years, but it popped into my head today, and I didn't know we were going to talk about it. But but that's a bit of synchronicity there.
Yeah. So whilst he's helping people, this doctor, his own wounds are healed up by this kind of, I suppose, an astral being that's been there a number of years. He isn't an angel, but he's almost got angelic kind of healing qualities, this guy. And the other thing is that they bring down people from even higher realms from where they are to talk to them. And there's sort of celestial beings that come down. But the weird thing about it, I mean, you read accounts of people on the other side where everyone reverts to a younger age, pretty much so. And so someone who maybe dies at the age of 85 finds that they kind of find themselves in a body that they naturally feel drawn to, of their version of maybe when they were 30, 35 years of age anyway, of maybe how they felt at their prime or something. Whereas in this particular film, they overlooked that part, or they reinterpret it in their own way. I'm not quite sure. But there's quite a few really old people there that look like they're in their 80s or something, acting as guides or helpers in some way. And you're thinking, why haven't they sort of become young? And I said this to my wife when we was watching it, and she goes, well, I suppose from the film's point of view, you end up with a film with a load of young people, and it might not attract the right audience. I don't know. So maybe they was trying to sort of like make a that they need obviously to employ various actors and things, and so it was quite a big production with lots of extras and that, and they just wanted to employ as many people as possible, I presume, and make it a bit varied. There's ethnics around, the ethnic minorities that are featured in the film and everything, and they all kind of assemble on riverbanks and watch concerts and things, which is typical stuff I've read in other material by other channeled mediums. There's a particular book I read a number of years ago called Life in the Hereafter by a medium who channeled the material similar to this Brazilian channel. His name was Anthony Borgia, and he channeled the material that sent through from a deceased Reverend or Monsignor Hugh Benson, I think his name was, who died in around 1910 or something like that, passed over to the spirit world, met with his friend who was a man of the cloth as well, and he showed him the ropes literally around the spirit world. And one of the things were that they would go to concerts and see them, playing orchestra stuff, and they would go to lovely vast pasture fields and beautiful lakes and everything like that. And he said how time flew, that he realized after a while that he'd been there since it seemed arrived yesterday. But there's an interesting point in that book that wasn't really made aware of in this film, because I suppose there will be differences, is that after it passed over, although he was really enjoying his new environment in the spirit world, this is Monsignor Hugh Benson, he said that he felt like a sadness within him, and he couldn't work out where the sadness was coming from. So he asked his friend, who had been there some years, why do I feel sad? And why what's this melancholy feeling I've got going about me? And he said, what you're feeling there is the effects of your death upon the people on the earth plane, your family and friends. They're mourning you, and you're feeling their thoughts and feelings. He says, gradually, as you acclimatize yourself to this realm, those feelings will become less so, and you'll be able to continue without being hindered by them. But it's like you have to be cleansed of your last vestiges of your earthly life, and this is one of the effects of them. And I think in the Astral City film, the doctor was being cleansed of his last vestiges of his astral life. The wounds started to heal up, the physical wounds, and yet in other accounts of the spirit world, you go over and all those wounds are immediately gone. So I think it depends on which region you go to, on what particular level, because you're going to have different effects according to your frequency, your vibration, your thoughts and stuff, and your beliefs. But he gets taken, this the Brazilian doctor, when he's in the Astral City. This younger guy takes him to show him around, and he takes him up all this I think I can't remember what it was called, like a flying tram or something that they went on. Do you remember that, Stephen, that bit where they went on this bus, or the Airbus or something, I think it was called? Yeah.
I don't know what it was called, but
I kind of laughed when I saw that. I think it was an Airbus. They called it an Airbus. Not made by Boeing, I should add, just made by the spirit world. But you could see rivets on it, which was interesting. So my mind does somersaults thinking, well, hang on, the rivets, they're normally hot pieces of metal that some guy hammers in. Are you telling me there's been some spiritual angel that's hammering hot rivets into metal and cooling it down in some way, But the other side of the coin was that the doctor remarks on all these wondrous inventions, and they said, well, we do send inventions, anything we think up here and we invent, we send down to the earth plane, and where you discover these inventions and you reinvent them into your earthly world. But I thought, well, when he was sweeping up in this hospital, they obviously had run out of the inventions of vacuum cleaners, because he was back to a good old dustpan and brush sort of thing, you know.
They
But
apparently
he
they
meets his
sent that
mother
one
there,
down and
which
they
is a
lost
common
it.
thing.
Apparently they sent that one
Yeah,
down and
they
then they
lost the
forgot
plans
to
for that one.
take it back. You know.
It was too dangerous for mankind, a whole vacuum cleaner.
That's the
Go on, Ben.
the notion of people having looking a certain way in the spirit world. It could be for whatever reason they just prefer to look older. Maybe because they were happier as old people than young people. As a lot of people say they are. A lot of people tell me that they are happier being older. When they're older, people have become happier than when they're younger. Probably because they learn more, they know more, and they've integrated more of their experiences and things like that. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. It could be just the reason. But the idea that your experience in the spirit world is affected by those you leave behind, of course, is a theme in other pieces of fiction. For example, What Dreams May Come. This is a big part of What Dreams May Come. The link between Chris and his wife, who dies after him. He dies first, and then she dies afterwards. But also the grieving of others. Of course, like, it's if you lose someone you love, it's a terrible thing. But if they commit suicide, it's far worse. It's just the worst form of grief. And now, according to what I've seen of this film, the doctor doesn't commit suicide. However, he is believed to have been by the people he first encounters in the astral. That's why I'm just reading the Wikipedia page. And there is something wrong with him. I don't know exactly, but you say he led a selfish life. He was things like that. There's clearly some kind of like emotional dark energy there between him and the life he's just led, which I'll probably know more if I see the film. Which I've got to do that now.
Yeah. They say that, I mean, it seemed to suggest, he said, but the doctor said, but I haven't committed suicide. And they said, you have. And he couldn't understand it, because he died on the operating table in a hospital. And they said that your thoughts and feelings, because of your selfishness and your lack of empathy for other people, you were actually signing your own death warrant type of thing. And that's your own suicide, that you were killing yourself inside with those negative harboring thoughts. But it wasn't really a conscious suicide. But you could probably say that for everybody else on Earth, pretty much, so that we're all killing ourselves in some way or other, because we all end up, I mean, unless you're murdered by someone, but even then you could say, well, you brought that on because of XYZ thought or something. But yeah, it was an interesting concept, a little bit confusing for the average viewer. I think this particular film, The Astral City, is one of those things that you couldn't probably watch it just off the cuff, as not having any experience of the spiritual worlds or reading books on mediums. I think you have to watch it with a kind of a bit of an A to Z of stuff that you've read before, that kind of gives some explanations of perhaps what's going on, so you can understand it better. Would you agree with that, Stephen?
Yeah, and I also think that what you said about the producer and the people that created the film, they always have their input. And you'd almost have to compare the original novel to the film to see where the producer took liberties. I mean, he probably made the bolts and rivets, and who knows what he may have introduced to the novel. So you don't really know. I was also going to say there's a film by Bruce Joel Rubin, who wrote the film Ghost. He also did a film called My Life, and that's about a fellow that he's a high-powered executive, and he gets cancer. And in the process of going through fighting the cancer, he goes to a Chinese doctor, and the doctor says, does work on him and says, oh, you have this emotional poison, in yourself. In other words, same idea that as the film here, that he had basically poisoned himself with his mental, attitudes.
Go on, Ben. You were going to say something.
That's an interesting thing. I've seen the film Ghost. I haven't seen My Life, but there's this again. We have this theme of things that's just bridging between life and death based on actions in your life. In the film Ghost, and I didn't know who the writer was at this time. Sounds interesting that he wrote another film like that. We have a man, he's called Sam, played by Patrick Swayze, who is murdered but cannot leave the physical plane. He's a trapped soul because of the nature of his death and the fact that his ex-partner, Demi Moore's character, Molly, is now in danger. But once he's done that, he can ascend in this beam of light and move on to the next part of his existence. But he can't do it until he's fulfilled that duty. It's as if he has unfinished business.
Yeah.
And maybe that's maybe this is why we do see the spirits of the deceased in our own world. I've even had this experience myself. I won't go into details now, but I've experienced a sighting of somebody who is deceased, connected to me and my social circle, who I didn't know at the time. It was later confirmed to me who this person was through a photograph.
Wow. It's not the story I thought it was, because I remember you saying you saw a ghost of a boy when you was in your bedroom once.
Yeah,
rising up or something.
This is a different story.
Or something?
Yeah, this is a different case. This is a different case. It's a story too long to tell here, but it does happen. It happens to a lot of people.
So, Stephen, have you seen any spirits or had any communicate? I know that you've obviously spoken about Matthew and things like that, communicated with Matthew's wife in the spirit world. But you've gone and seen mediums, haven't you, and had readings and things. But have you actually seen any spirits or felt a presence of a spirit at all?
I felt presences. Yeah, there's some ghost hunters here that I know, not here but in New England, and they maintain a house called the James House in New Hampshire. And I went there, and I went up in the attic. They took us on a little kind of a private tour. And I was up there, and all of a sudden I was overwhelmed with the feeling that I was choking to death up there, that I was suffocating in the heat in that attic. And it was so powerful that I had to really use my force of will not to run down the stairs and get out of there. And I had to tell myself, this is not me. This is some impression I'm getting. But apparently somebody had suffocated up there. Now, whether that was a person that was actually conveying that to me, or whether it was an impression I was picking up from the place, I don't know, but it was quite tangible. So I've had a few experiences on that level. Most of it is communicating with Abby. So, for the last 16 years, we've been a couple across the divide, and she taught me to communicate with her, but I don't see anything. I've never seen anything. I did have an experience once where and this was just once, where I just spontaneously held out my arms and, said, like, come to me or something like that. And it was very tangible. I felt this electricity come, like adjacent to me or in my body and stay there for several seconds, basically as long as I wanted it to. It was immediately responsive, So, but always on the level of electricity and kind of like, it felt like a lot of static electricity, basically what it felt like, in a presence. But I've never seen her. The only time I've seen her was in a visitation dream very early on. I had a rather vivid dream, and I'd never met her or talked to her. I'd never seen her picture, but I had this dream, and we were driving in a tunnel underwater, and we're driving, and I'm driving, and she's sitting in the passenger seat, and I got a very good look at her. We had a long discussion, but I don't remember anything about the discussion. I don't remember the content. But right at the end, I began to become lucid in the dream. And I said to her, I was skeptical. And I said, you're not a real girl. I'm imagining this. And she was very amused. And she says, oh, is that so? And then the dream was over, right? So, but I still had this very clear image of what she looked like. So I got on Google and I started looking for a woman, portrait. And when I would see a portrait that looked like the woman I saw in the dream, I would download it. I ended up downloading 13, where 2 of them it was a duplicate, it was like a picture and a drawing. And I had that. And then I think it was 2 weeks later, I managed to find Abby's historical portrait. I'd never seen it before. And it's very similar, way beyond chance, to 3 or 4 of those pictures. They all look kind of similar, but there's 2 or 3 of them that are extremely similar. So in that sense, I verified that the dream was real. But then I've never had a dream like that since. I every once in a while I'll kind of say, it's been 16 years now. How about another one? But that's all, just that one. I've also had a couple experiences where just as I was waking up, I'd have a face right before my face, like looking right into my eyes, and it was, not frightening, and it wasn't, it was just kind of neutral, and they were just looking right into my eyes for a few seconds as I woke up. So I think that was probably a spirit contact as well.
It's a pity that you can't be together, because I remember you telling us about it's coming back to the last interview you gave us, and I remember that now. It's a pity you can't be together, but it's interesting you didn't, even though you didn't see anything in this experience in the attic, you felt what someone else had felt.
Panic.
Yeah. So someone else's thoughts and feelings from that time were put into you as if you were thinking and feeling them. Is that there's a word for that? Not trans sensation, it's trans something else, but
I don't know the technical name.
There is a technical term for that, but wow, how about that? That's amazing. That's amazing.
It was overwhelming. I mean, I like I said, I had to force myself to say, this is not me, and I can stay up here, but I felt like I was suffocating. Yeah, really strong.
Wow.
I didn't expect to experience anything, I just kind of going along with the tour,
Some people can think that they tour the spirit world in their dreams and things like that, and they visit the various levels or even do soul rescue work. I mean, I've had dreams where I've been on a train and I've been taking people to a destination that I didn't even know. And then I've dropped them off on a platform, and that's it. And that's been kind of a repeatable dream over the last sort of 30 years or so. Not every week, but maybe once every 10 years or something, and it's just popped back as a kind of a memory or an interpretation of it as being on a train platform, helping people cross over, possibly. Now, getting back to the film, The Astral City, there's these lower levels, which intrigue me a little bit because they're mentioned in the Anthony Borgia book, Life in the Hereafter. And Monsignor Hugh Benson, that's the person that's passed over, along with his friend, his spiritual friend, they go down with another lady, I think, who's called Ruth, down to these lower levels. And he said that they can't be seen by the residents there, but they can sometimes be felt. So they're almost like ghosts themselves when they go down to these lower astral realms, and they try and influence people and help them to raise up their consciousness in some way, because they said they're trapped by their own limiting thoughts or whatever it is that's put them there. And it's normally these people that are very, very selfish, self-absorbed, wrapped up in their own things, don't give a toss about any other people, but they try and squeeze any last residue of humanity out of these people to try and lift them up. But they say, according to Earth cycles, you could be trapped down there for a long, long time, thousands of years in some respects. So it kind of does help that you cross over, at least with a kind of an understanding of some sort of spiritual world, even if you don't fully understand the whole things of it. So it sounds like we're all trying to be a load of do-gooders, but it's certainly not a place I really want to end up going to. But I mean, certainly the doctor in the film, The Astral City, seemed to appear to help people. And he actually came face to face with one of his patients in this Astral City, had later died. And he didn't really want to give her time because he still had the old vestiges of Earth within him. I think he was always annoyed by her, but she actually came to him and said, "Doctor, I want to thank you for all you did for me and my husband when we were on Earth." And there's part of it where she says later on in the film, she goes, "Doctor, I know my husband's died, but I can't find him here in the Astral City. He's not here at all." And the doctor kind of looks a little bit kind of guilty, because I think he suspects that he's perhaps down in these lower astral areas himself, but he doesn't want to say. I'm not sure how that comes about, whether later on they go down and find him and bring him back. I'm not sure. It's one of these films I'll have to watch again. But yeah, so they kind of, they're quite accurate. This film was quite accurate in its portrayal according to the books that I've read. They seem to cover all the main ingredients that follow in other books of life in the spiritual dimensions. Now, you've interviewed this guy that I sent you the email for, Stephen. I forget the name of the guy that sends out these emails.
Michael Tim.
Time about his research into various. Michael, that was it. Michael Tim, that's right. So you think you've done a podcast with him, and I went searching for it, but I couldn't find it. But can you remember much about your interview with him at all?
Yeah, I sent you a link, but you must not have gotten it. I'll send it to you after the show. But yeah,
I've been away,
what,
so yeah, I'm a bit behind on these things.
what I wanted to ask him about, and what we talked about, was the history in the United States of and in Europe also of mediumship. So he went through some of the famous ones, Daniel Douglas Hume, for example, and Piper, I think her name was. And I mean, I don't remember all the names, but he went through all the famous
Lenora
ones.
Piper.
Yeah, Lenora Piper, yeah. And Crook, the investigator, and so forth. So that was the whole
William
point of it, was to try to educate the public in a general way that there is this history, August history, and that this is nothing really new, that for 150 years or more, we've had this kind of evidence.
Yeah, there's the golden age of psychical research, probably from the for the mid to late 19th century, definitely. That was when it was really taken seriously to a big. You get like these figures like Oliver Lodge and Logie Baird and people like that. Really, the guy who invented TV was originally interested in contacting the spirit world. The television itself was an offshoot of a device, that a trans communication device he was using. But it's interesting about hell, because hell, of course, exists in religion. It exists in of course, you go to church and you learn about hell. But the big difference I found, indeed, there's a good article in Nexus magazine about hell, is that the big difference between the Judeo-Christian Islamic vision of hell, the Abrahamic religion, and what we've actually learned from it, is it's not necessarily a permanent dwelling place. It exists, but you can get out of it. And some people who end up there do actually escape through various means. And we've seen there's various fictional accounts, and indeed channeled messages of people who've done that.
I personally think that when reincarnation was taken out of Christianity, they had to replace it with something. So they replaced it with this idea of eternal heaven and eternal hell. Because, I mean, previously when you reincarnate, it's a whole cycle. You go to the other side and you're in a space depending on your headspace, basically. And then you eventually reincarnate, and it's a cycle. When they broke that cycle, they had to replace it with eternal heaven. And then if heaven was eternal, now hell had to be eternal. And the idea of an eternal hell is absolutely awful, because you can't consign someone forever and ever and ever and ever to a place like that. So it's a serious mistake taking reincarnation out.
Oh, it was, or maybe not a mistake. I mean, I can't go into it's a bit very complicated. I won't go into details, but I think there may be political reasons why we have religion in the form that it is, rather than what it used to be. Yeah,
agree.
Now, you mentioned, Ben, about various mediums, and I don't know if it was the ones always in Brazil. I'm certainly aware of one medium that died at the hands of another. The Mirabelli, who was a materialization medium, who I think in the late 1920s, he was gaining ground, producing many demonstrations of his physical mediumship. That's where he was producing spirits literally out of thin air of deceased members of the village he came from, or the city, including prominent people like bishops and doctors and things that had passed over, children that had passed over that belonged to prominent people in the city. And he was even investigated by the government of the day, including engineers, military men, scientists and things. And they produced a report on his mediumship and they declared it genuine. So it's interesting that later on, just he was kind of getting to the peak of his career, that he was killed in an accident, and I'll say in an accident quotes, when he walked across the road to get his child an ice cream, and this car came screaming around the corner and drove into him and killed him outright. So we lost a great man there, a great man of mediumship that could have really opened our eyes even further had he maybe be able to continue for another 20 years or so. You mentioned another medium that got killed, didn't you?
Yes, in fact, I wrote this a long time ago. I wrote this 11 years ago, but I actually covered this on Panama Voice, that the attacks against mediums in Brazil is actually quite considerable. In fact, there's been a wave, I describe a wave of attacks. And one was somebody called Gilberto Arruda, who was a well-known medium. He was kidnapped. He was a brutal murder. He was tortured and killed. He was found, his body was found with his hands bound. And at the same time, Chico Xavier's memorial was desecrated. It was attacked. And this is just this is blamed by the local police on what they call evangelicals, which means there are people within the church in Brazil. And I mean, obviously, people who go to church, I mean, there's millions of them. There are all kinds of people, but there appear to be some who are actually very, very hostile to the idea of spiritualism. And I mean, maybe they're just intolerant, maybe they're just ignorant. It's interesting, by the way, that they stand shoulder to shoulder with the atheoskeptics over this, the Richard Dawkinses of this world and James Randys and people like that. We've also seen a case that I've investigated very clearly, which is kind of similar. Helen Duncan, the Scottish medium, she wasn't killed, but she was put in jail. And Stephen, I'm sure you've heard of her. Yeah. And I think maybe there were those in authority that are frightened of what mediums could tell us. And as I said, there are political reasons for this. Maybe there's a distinct reason in terms of our relationship with the state and how it operates, where the people need to believe that we are just like temporary pieces of meat that then just disappear at the end of our brief animation, or we go to face some all-powerful, merciless God that consigns us to eternal heaven or eternal hell. And you've got to choose one or the other of those two particular options, but you can't go the third way. There's no other option. David Icke has discussed this in detail. He calls them opposames for that reason, because they appear to be opposites when actually they're both the same, and they both serve a similar purpose politically. So yeah, there's actually a film, a really, really good film actually called The Discovery, which you can get on Netflix actually, and it has proliferated a bit, shall we say. Robert Redford plays a mad scientist who has discovered that there actually is an afterlife, and he's proved it. And people then immediately start killing themselves to get there. Now, I personally don't believe that would happen in that scenario. I mean, I think this is kind of like a bit of a skeptic nightmare fantasy.
Yeah.
But there's a very, very interesting piece of dialogue, and Neil knows about this because I played this at my talk at the Dorset Earth Mysteries group, where the character of Thomas Harbour, played by Robert Redford, his son goes to him and tries to persuade him to tell everyone, look, I was wrong. He says, well, you've got to tell everyone you were wrong. And he says, I wasn't wrong. I was right. Yeah, but tell everyone you were wrong. Because if we won't, so many people have died. So in other words, he's advocating a cover-up.
Mm.
And I do wonder, obviously this is like a thought experiment, I think, on the part of the filmmakers, but is it possible there are those in power who are actually thinking in those terms?
I doubt it, but what do you think, Neil?
I don't know. I think that there could be a cover-up. I've suspected that there possibly might be. I allude to it in my book a little bit, True Tales of the Paranormal, where, for instance, when you get a demonstration of mediumship on broadcast television over here in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the States or for other countries, they always have this kind of announcement prior to the broadcast, the introduction of the program, saying, don't take this as factual information or
entertainment.
Alluding to it rather than being, entertainment purposes only. Take it with a pinch of salt. Don't go and bet your life on it. There's no proof of this kind of thing, etc., etc., etc. And that's just before a party political broadcast, let alone mediumship. But yeah, they've done it. They've done it with mediums like Colin Fry and Tony Stockwell and people like that on the UK Living TV show. But they used to do it a lot of times on the BBC back in the 80s, I remember. And Yeah, on the similar broadcast, for instance, we used to have. I don't watch TV in a broadcast sense now. I haven't done it for years, but there used to be various religious programs that were part of the BBC's commitment to religious programming back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And they used to have various programs called Today's Service is from the such and such cathedral with the Archbishop of so and so. And they would never, ever say, look, we don't know the proof of what he's about to talk about. Take it with a pinch of salt. It's for entertainment purposes. There was never such a commitment to say that announcement. You just took the whole thing as either fact or you just weren't interested. Whereas with the mediumship thing, they always said, look, this isn't really that real. Just take it as entertainment. He's doing, they were almost saying that the medium is doing some sort of, gag or pretense here, etc., etc. And it's almost like the state don't want you to take mediumship completely truthfully. They can't bury it completely, so they just don't want you to look too closely at it. That's the kind of inference that it brings across to me.
I agree that there's a cover up. I just don't think it's to keep people from killing themselves. But I think any serious challenge to the status quo, that there's immediately a cover up, and that includes mediumship. I mean, mental mediumship, they seem to just kind of ignore. So you have quite a number of mental mediums on YouTube that are producing evidential material. Every time they give a reading, they get a name or two names, or the one I liked best was years ago was John Edward was reading somebody, and he says that I forget exactly how much he got, but he got that they were looking at a wedding dress and there was a dead mouse in it. Now that's a pretty specific, unique thing. And he was right. The lady had been looking at her wedding dress and there was a dead mouse in it, So, I mean, things like that, nowadays, like I said, you watch some of these readings and they get a name. Every single reading, they get an accurate name. So it's a done deal for a great many people. And yet the status quo is just ignoring it like it's not there. They don't engage, just pretend it's not there.
It's funny to give Richard Dawkins his credit, and I mean, I'm not a fan of Richard Dawkins. I've got a lot of disagreements with him, but don't like the guy particularly. But he wanted to, he approached the BBC and tried to get the rule applied evenly across all boards. So he wanted actually to have a big disclaimer before songs of praise or Sunday worship, saying that everything you see in this program you should regard as entertainment and not regard it as real. He wanted to do that actually. Of course, the BBC it didn't work. But the BBC actually told him to get lost.
Everybody wanted to keep their job in the BBC, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, you mentioned John Edwards, and I think it was him that you had gone to see because you'd been watching his broadcasts on YouTube or something, and you thought either this is clever editing or the guy is genuine, and you wasn't sure what to make of it. So tell us about that story that you decided to actually put your money where your mouth was, wasn't it? You actually went out and saw him.
Well, we're talking 20, 25 years ago when he was doing Crossing Over, and I wasn't familiar with mediumship. And as I watched these things, I developed a list, of the possible normal explanations. And they were things like, cold reading. Well, I could eliminate that pretty quickly with things like the mouse and stuff. They were things like, but there were certain ones I couldn't eliminate. And one of them was editing. And one of them was that he had a plant in the audience, which means a confederate, in the audience who you would pretend he didn't know them and, whatever. So I said, well, I can't eliminate those unless I see him in person. So I put my money down and I went and saw him in a live situation. You're talking 3,000 people in a room. And I unfortunately don't remember the details now, but he said he had a couple names and he had blackness in the chest, I think it was, and a couple other details, and nobody was answering. Nobody was taking it, right? So then he walked down the aisle and he ended up standing right next to me, looking at me like with his back turned to me because he was looking at somebody. I was on the side and he was looking in the middle. So he's standing right there And he points to two ladies and he says, it's right in here. Like he's taking these 3,000 people and he's pointing to two or three, and they're about maybe 15 or 20 feet from where he's standing and where I'm sitting. And it turns out all the details were right. The names were right, except that this person had lung cancer and it had gone up to their brain, I think it was, and they died of brain cancer. So they didn't want to take it because, the matter of death was a little different. But then John Edwards started talking about how one of them had not been there to say goodbye. This lady had lived on the other coast of the United States. She had not made it in time. I think it was her mother, and had not made it in time for the death. And she was very upset about that. And so he kind of worked through that, and she's crying, and he moves on to some other people. So that's fine. So that goes on. Maybe the show went on for another 10 or 15 minutes. And then it's time for everybody to leave. So we all, because it's, 3,000 people, takes a while to empty an auditorium that big. So everybody stands up and we're waiting to kind of find, and I look over where this lady was. Again, it's only 15, 20 feet away from me. And I notice she's still crying. Nobody is looking at her. Nobody's paying the slightest attention to her, and she's still crying. I said, that cannot be a Confederate. That cannot be a plant, because no actress would bother continuing to act 15 minutes after, when the show is ending and nobody's paying any attention to her. So I said, I've disproved both of the remaining natural explanations, because he can do it live without editing, get the names and so on. And she's clearly not a plant. So that's the logical process I went through. I said, let's just see if I could tick each one of these things off in turn.
These accusations that you hear from skeptics are very often, they are assumptions, or what I call the clown's day off fallacy, which, to cut a long story short, means they're just thinking of something, anything that comes into their head.
Oh yeah,
say, well, that explains it. You don't need any evidence, but it's kind of wins by default because it doesn't involve ghosts, through some logic that the skeptic never explains.
It's like the near-death experience, and the official explanation for that is that, the brain keeps working a little bit later after death, and so for 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and that's the whole explanation for near-death experiences, which is completely illogical, because you've got blind people who have never seen in their whole lives, and they have a near-death experience, and then they describe the pattern on the guy's tie, never having seen anything in their whole lives. They get out of their body and they describe things that were actually happening that they could see, well, that's not explained by these theories.
So I 100% agree, Stephen. In fact, there's a huge amount of research that's been done into this, which I'm very interested in. And what you said about John Edwards, there's an absolutely textbook mirror image example of a very, very similar thing here with I don't know if it's Britain, because this happened in Ireland. Sally Morgan, she's another pop medium. I don't know if she's made it over to the States yet, but she's very popular in Britain and Ireland. She was accused by Paul Zenon, who's actually a skeptic and magician here in Britain, who wrote for the Daily Express. He actually said that He said that Sally Morgan is using an earpiece and getting information from a Confederate, just like Peter Popoff used to do before he was caught by James Randi. And he knows. You know how he knows this? Because somebody told him who was in the audience when she did her show in Dublin. He was in the audience and he heard someone at the back just repeating what Sally was saying, right? That's his audience. He heard it third hand from someone in the audience in Dublin, and he went and published this in the newspaper. As a result, Sally was sent all kinds of hate mail and stuff like that. She sued the Express and won, got £100,000 in damages plus costs. Paul Zenon himself personally wasn't sued, but the editor, probably, I imagine the editor has cancelled Paul's column, shall we say. He's no longer a staff writer there. But this is an example of what we're saying. This is the clown's day off fallacy. Zenon didn't know anything. He had no evidence. He didn't do what Randi did. To give him his credit, James Randi did actually hire an electronics intelligence expert from the police to go in and actually record the transmissions, and he caught Popoff red-handed. Zenon didn't bother himself with such niceties and details. He just decided to accuse her with no evidence at all in the Daily Express. And what bugs me about this is the skeptosphere was 100% behind Xenon. Even after the lawsuit, they did not understand the blunder that they had committed. They just said, "Oh no, Paul was right. They shouldn't. This is completely wrong." But they wasn't. You see, Paul accused somebody without evidence, and that's the point. But they don't. The skeptics don't understand this. They don't understand their own stupidity. It took me to point this out for some of them to get it.
I have a theory about skeptics, and that is that there's a continual process where real skeptics, because skepticism is a time-honored tradition where you go in without having prejudged and you analyze and you go through a period of not knowing. It's not a lifetime of not knowing. You approach something not being certain, and then you vet the thing, you test it, and then they come out the other side convinced. So there's a continual leaking or leaching away of sincere skeptics from the group because they get convinced. So that leaves behind the people that are not rational. So gradually you get more and more and more irrational people in the skeptical group, because otherwise they would have been convinced by now. See? So
exactly.
At some point your body of skeptics is a bunch of cynics, and they're not really skeptics anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I know this because the way they treat the people who change their minds is awful. I mean, Dawkins himself said there's no such thing as an ex-atheist. He says there's no such thing as a former atheist. If any atheist changes their mind and starts believing in God, they were never an atheist to begin with. In other words, they were unworthy of being in the cult to begin with. And you get this with cults, Stephen, all the time.
Exactly.
There's never a legitimate reason to leave the cult. People who survive cults and they come out of it, they say everyone who leaves is castigated by those who remain behind and is demonized and rejected.
Mm-hmm.
It's even the Jehovah's Witnesses do this. They shun the people who leave the religion, and so you're right. What you get is you get this. It's a kind of community that sees itself as rational, and they even say that they believe that the ultimate arbiters of reason and science, but then they can't actually live up to that, and they don't understand how they don't live up to that. They can't see that. They can't see it because they're inside it.
They can't see themselves.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, have you seen any mediums at spiritualist churches or demonstrations that you can maybe share a story about?
Many. I mean, I don't go to the spiritual churches anymore, but I used to go quite a bit, and there was I had some good times there. To be honest, much of the mediumship wasn't that good. Most of them were people who would come and sit, and they bring different people in at different times. I went more for the social life than anything else, just to talk to people who didn't think I was crazy, which is nice. I'm more interested in stories, and actually there's one exception, but I will say that when I interviewed Victor and Wendy Zamet, they told me a lot of information about this sort of thing. I will say there's one exception, which was when I actually did go and see Jason Harrington. Now, he is a transfiguration medium. He actually got in touch with me when I interviewed this lady whose name now escapes me. It was the last interview.
I thought we'd pause tonight's episode of the Paranormal Peep Show because Ben mentioned talking to a transfiguration medium. That lady was Jean Skinner, a spiritualist medium from the Northeast, who Ben interviewed at her home in 2018 about her phenomena, and Ben has kindly let us view that interview in part. So we'll take a break from the normal programming and we'll see you in a minute.
The Hospital Ports, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to her Panmo TV. I'm Ben Emlyn-Jones, and I'm here with Jean Skinner. Hello, Jean. How are you? Thanks for inviting me here today to talk to you. It's good to talk to you. And what is it you do?
What is it I do? Are you talking about a particular strain of mediumship here?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm quite well known because of transfiguration, which is something that not everyone can do, because basically you have to sort of have a chemical makeup in your being to produce this kind of phenomenon. There are different forms that people mistakenly take for real transfiguration, called moldings, and that's a very different thing altogether, because true transfiguration is done with ectoplasm. Now, this ectoplasm, and when you say this word, most people immediately think of great mounds of dense energy as you get in fully materialized forms. But of course, it isn't like that at all. There's a very fine web of energy just in front of the facial features. And what spirit actually do is basically walk through my conscious mind to press their features into that very fine web of energy, therefore showing themselves as they remember themselves. And I want you to think about that, because I have found over the years from experience that people invariably say, well, you look so much younger. But I always say, when I die, if I'm 95, when I die, I'm never going to look a day older than 25. And people tend to portray themselves, I think, as they think of themselves at their best time in their lives.
So when they come through in spirit,
Yes.
no matter what they were like when they died, because of course we live a whole lifespan. We start as little babies, and if we're lucky, we end up dying when we're old.
Mentioning babies, right? In California, one family of 7 came, the mother and her 6 daughters, and daughters and granddaughters, and they saw the grandmother transfigured, and they said, but Nana, you look so much younger than when you died. And you never know what spirits are going to do. You can't predict what they're going to do. And she went from showing herself when she was 95 years of age. She went all the way back in different stages till a baby's face. And her family recognized that baby's face as her, genuinely her. And then she went all the way back again from being an infant to being 95 years of age.
She showed her face as she looked in different stages of her whole lifetime.
Yes.
So the ectoplasm, which is is material that is associated with manifestation mediums and people like that. What the effect of it being over your face means that for the sitter, it'll look as if your face changes and it turns into a different form. And we have some examples here actually in picture form. These pictures were taken while you were in trance.
Yes.
See these, ladies and gentlemen? These are pictures here of Jean there. And so when were these taken?
Oh, I can't tell you off the top of my head.
That's all right.
I'd have to go back. This was probably in the very beginning when I first started to work publicly. You know, because I sat for 8 years before I worked publicly.
When did you first realise that you had this remarkable ability?
Well, I didn't. I didn't see it. Other people saw it and I didn't. And we were just so thrilled. None of us, my group and I, we knew nothing about physical phenomena. And it was so exciting, the different things that happened. Absolutely wonderful. But overall, I have to say, it was the great feeling of love. And I look at mediumship today and I think they've missed all that. That element has gone from their work. And that's a great shame because it would benefit themselves as well as everyone else if they worked that little bit harder.
I much prefer the kind of mediumship and the kind of spiritist churches where it's less commercial and it's less about publicity and egos.
It is not entertainment.
Yeah, no, it's not.
What about the circle when you had the flame?
When I had
The flame, the candle.
all the candles.
Until then,
Well, in the very beginning, communication with spirit at that time, the first phenomena began with a candle. Yeah, now you think, how can that begin with a candle? But we got flowers manifesting in the candle flame, and the wick of the candle would be the stem of the flower, and around it would build up petals. We've had Madonna lilies, we've had pansies, roses. We had the colours Absolutely, it was just a wonderful experience, an expression of love, because they can't speak to us, can they?
No.
They can get their message across, depending how good the mediumship is, but they can't actually speak to us in so many words, unless, of course, you have direct voice, which is a different mediumship again.
Very often, I find that with spirits, I mean, there's no doubt that spirits appear to have an awareness of who they were in their previous life,
Also,
and they have memories of their life still, and they have the ability to see our world. As I think this is where the role of the medium comes in. And,
that's very important.
yeah. So, what do you say to the people who would come out and they say, "Well, this is all nonsense. It doesn't exist. It's all in your imagination."
Well, I can only say I know on 3 occasions when I've been demonstrating in workshops run by very reputable lady that was a wonderful medium herself. We had on 3 occasions atheists, and they each said to me after they witnessed what they did that night, "I was an atheist when I came in here tonight, but I'm going away, and I believe in the afterlife."
Oh wow, that's amazing. It's very often it's just simply having that experience and looking at the actual evidence, which is real. When you, I mean, it's well, I've got skeptic friends. You know, I don't object. Most of them are well behaved, but I do feel that it is a belief system of theirs in a sense. It's an almost like religious type belief system of its own, I find.
Well, it to me it is a religion, but I know I had a television producer and a director. I didn't know them, they were just there in the audience. And they were so thrilled at what they witnessed that night. They said that they went back to the television studios and they had to get everybody, that means the cameraman, the people who put the money up for the program, they had to get them all to work for nothing so they could put it across as a real demonstration of mediumship, meaning that it was not going to be portrayed as entertainment.
Right.
And the only way they could do that was if everyone was willing to work for nothing.
I see. So that's quite it's good to have these kinds of conditions set, because the mainstream media generally, I find, has a poor record of the way they portray this. Maybe that's putting it lightly. And I've seen some pretty awful programs about paranormal. Yes, you think stuff like that. Yeah. And I mean, your own experience with it's a pussycat. Yeah. That noise you heard a minute ago is not actually a ghost, Dora. It's the cat coming in. There's a pussycat by my feet. Now, what's your own experience of dealing with the mainstream media generally? Because I know you've been in several TV shows and things like this.
I always refused television. I walked out of one. I do regret walking. I wouldn't go. David Frost, I regret that very much. And Esther Ranson. Because of the experience I had where they were telling me what I had to reply.
Oh, that's the problem, isn't it? Yeah, that's not the right way to do it.
It's not a script. And I know other people who've been on television, and I know they get handed a script. And if this is a genuine inquiry, they don't need a script.
You have made several. I know you've made a documentary or two, because I've seen one of your documentaries. But is this privately produced? It's never been broadcast.
Oh yes, yes,
Oh, right.
yes, possibly an arm and a leg.
Well, it's worth it. It's very, very interesting. It's worth getting hold of the DVD if you can. Yeah, and you're an author. You've written several books.
No, I've wrote one book, and it was kept within the movement because spirit meant a great deal to me, and I didn't want it ridiculed. You have the likes of James Randi. I feel sorry for him because he wants so much to get this evidence, but he never will, because the energy that he gives off, he has such hatred about it all.
It does, yeah.
When any medium works with energy, what you portray, that is what you portray. energy. So it's impossible for him to get that evidence that he was, because he creates an adverse effect. It's impossible. Spirit work with love, not with hatred.
So the actual feelings of the people involved is very has enormous influence on the outcome.
Well, they don't all have to believe, and I've met many people who haven't believed, and it's a wonderful experience when, can I tell you one tale? I went to Holland, and the people there had never seen phenomena with the table phenomena, which is how spirit first began to communicate.
It's like table tip.
With people, yes. And a lot of people, they look down on that. It's a very basic mediumship. It's very basic indeed. But it was the first communication, table rapping. And as I say, these people had never seen it. But the people, the energy they create gets that table moving. But once the table moves, then a very definite, intelligent mind takes over. And that's when you get your evidence. And I remember the students did not believe in it. And when it did started to rotate, I realized that the table, because it was a pedestal table, round, and it was, instead of going around, just the tabletop was rotating, and it was unwinding. And I was so terrified that it would fly off and someone would get hurt, because it was moving.
Always one of those ones with it's like a screw, which is actually it's a single pedestal.
Yeah. And I can't tell you what I said because I was a bit tired. And I was speaking to spirit in my head, and I really thought this tabletop was going to fly off and hurt someone. Anyway, it stopped and it rewound itself. It actually rewound itself. So there you have an intelligent mind.
That's really amazing.
You're talking to it.
You can communicate. They can talk to them. Yeah, I've done table tipping twice in Nottingham, and it's quite amazing. Everyone was just putting their fingers lightly on the tabletop, and the skeptics put this down to ideomotor effect, which is a subconscious movement. But honestly, we weren't touching it. One of us took our hands off, and the table didn't continue the same movement.
No, that's right.
Yeah, it's a really remarkable thing, that.
Yeah, it is, yes. I've seen tables dancing with one another.
I was watching a video shot by Maureen, actually, Truth Seekers Northeast. It was actually moving into the audience, this table.
Well, it does.
Someone bolted, didn't they? Really frightened.
Well, I remember a young man, none of them had seen table dancing, and it was just local. It was to raise funds for a healing cemetery, and he got his grandmother, and apparently loved her so much she wouldn't go away, and he tried to climb up onto the rostrum. That would be the altar in an ordinary church. He tried to climb up, and the table was climbing on the chair after him, and he actually ran out, and the table followed him out. Couldn't get through the door. It couldn't get through the door. It was trying desperately to get through the door into the garden where he'd gone, but it actually followed him. So we're talking about an intelligence there.
You certainly are, yes. And have you ever been involved in psychical research?
I haven't deliberately not been involved. I just haven't really had the opportunity. I was asked years and years ago, to go to Japan, but the woman who was going to go with me, Eileen Roberts, she had prior engagements, and so we couldn't travel.
So, when Jean did the trance, that used to be the red light.
Yes, that's quite common. I've seen in sales and things. So this is another.
That's the reason.
Well, that was taken at standstill. Can you see the growth on the forehead?
Yes, I can. Can you see that, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, that's just closer to the lens, boy. Yeah. Yes, I can.
Now, here you have the ectoplasm. Can you see that?
Yes,
This is the ectoplasm. Look at the shape of the hands.
I can, yes.
They look massive, but I call this my empty-headed friend because if you look at this, you will see there's a mirror at the side of the cabinet, and you can see straight through her head
Yes,
into the mirror.
transparent.
Yes.
You see-
Don't ask me how that worked. I have no idea how that worked. But here, when people sit for phenomena, they always complain about the cold, in their legs. That looks like a blanket over my knees. It's the ectoplasm, which is not always seen like that. If you look at that, you can see it's resting over your knees. You go very cold from the waist down, very cold.
People report that. It's not something I've ever experienced myself, but I know people who've been at seances and they experienced it, and they
Drop
comment that.
right.
Yes, yeah. And this is, of course, the picture I showed you at the beginning of the face of.
Well, if you look at this, you'll see my thought is not like that at all. The energy is
It's not anything like you.
the energy is piped up through these cords here. Like this area opens right up. Look at this one.
Yeah. It's like you have something down on your chest here.
Yeah.
Have another look at that, ladies and gentlemen.
Of course we can. We have these in slides, of course, which is far better.
And they're on your,
So-
your documentary as well, I noticed. I saw you bought some film of
Yeah.
yourself on your documentary.
Yeah. But exciting when these things happen, when you get this evidence, because
Draining. Physically draining for the meeting.
it can be
mentally
because really everybody in that room is providing the energy that the medium needs to work with. And that energy, remember, is thought, right? And I found the easiest way to describe energy is to say to people, if you call it your friends and they've had it now, you don't need them to tell you they've had it now because you feel it.
Yes.
Yes, you feel it. If you go for a new house and you walk in, you either like the energy there or you say, oh no, this house isn't.
Well, no, it's ambience, I think, is the word they use. Yeah, it's you get a feeling something's wrong somewhere. I've had that many times. Yeah.
So there's people who want so much to get this evidence, they go with the wrong attitude. They're creating the wrong energy for anything to happen for them.
I see.
Can you understand that?
Yeah, I think so. It's about set and setting, as they say. So it's you got to be in the right frame of mind. As you said.
Well, you just have to be open-minded. Open-minded. You don't have to go believing, because spirit can change that for you. But it's just very an open mind. But if you go with so much animosity in you, you're killing the energy that is needed to produce this phenomenon.
Right, yeah. Right. Well, it's been really good talking to you. It's been really interesting what we've been talking about.
Well, we don't have long to get so much in, and we can't really put. Just a tip of the iceberg.
Just at the end of the whisper. I'm sorry we can't stay for longer. Maybe I can come. I'll be back. I'll come back another day. Maybe talk to you again.
Is that a promise or a threat?
Well, thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Gene Skinner, the medium. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.
Is to begin with. In other words, they were unworthy of being in the cult to begin with. And you get this with cults, Stephen, all the time.
Exactly.
There's never a legitimate reason to leave the cult. People who survive cults and they come out of it, they say, and everyone who leaves is castigated by those who remain behind and is demonized and rejected.
Mm-hmm.
It's even the Jehovah's Witnesses do this. They shun the people who leave the religion, and that. So you're right. What you get is you get this. It's a kind of community that sees itself as rational, and they even say that they believe that the ultimate arbiters of reason and science, but then they can't actually live up to that, and they don't understand how they don't live up to that. They can't see that. They can't see it because they're
They
inside
can't see themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, have you seen any mediums at spiritualist churches or demonstrations that you can maybe share a story about?
Many. I mean, I don't go to the spiritual churches anymore, but I used to go quite a bit, and there was some really. I had some good times there. To be honest, much of the mediumship wasn't that good. Most of them were people who would come and sit, and they bring different people in at different times. I went more for the social life than anything else, just to talk to people who didn't think I was crazy, which is nice. I'm more interested in stories. Actually, there's one exception, but I will say that when I interviewed Victor and Wendy Zamet, they told me a lot of information about this sort of thing. I will say there's one exception, which was when I actually did go and see Jason Harrington. Now, he is a transfiguration medium. He actually got in touch with me when I interviewed this lady whose name now escapes me. It was the last interview she ever gave before she passed over, who was a transfiguration medium from the Northeast. Jason Harrington performed a seance in front of me and a load of other people, and his face didn't. He says his face normally changes because he has ectoplasm on his face. That didn't happen, but his hands changed shape. And he said he did say beforehand that might happen. His hands might change shape, and they did. His hands, literally, his fingers lengthened, his nails turned bright red, and this was really weird because I was sitting literally within 3 feet of him, and I saw this happen. It's really, really weird. A very strange experience that was.
That's interesting because I've seen the same guy.
Harrington, yeah. Jason was on TV a couple of times. He was kind of like, but Stephen's carry on. Sorry.
I wonder what's the mechanism on that? I've never heard of this particular kind. I mean,
transfiguration medium is similar to manifestation mediumship, which Victor and Wendy have been studying in great detail. But what happens is that there is ectoplasm present, but it tends to cover the face or other parts of the body and essentially act as a mask.
Okay.
It's quite rare. It's very, very different from, like, say, mental mediumship and things like that, clairvoyance. There's only a few people who could do this, and one was this lady I met in the Northeast. I went up to Truth Seekers Northeast, and I did a little interview with this lady, and she was a very interesting one. She showed me some photographs that have been taken by psychical researchers of this happening. Yeah.
Now, what's the name of the physical medium that Victor and Wendy Zamet have? His first name is David.
Yeah, I can't remember. I interviewed them for my own show,
David,
and I can't remember.
Thompson
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I get their newsletter every week, and I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, they've seen several manifestation mediums, and I hear people all the time. I've just been watching this video that they recommended to me, and there's people in the comments section saying, I literally held the hands of somebody in an ectoplasmic being.
With that, if I can just interject, I'll talk about Jason Harrington first of all, because I think we've discussed this before, Ben, that I saw him back in about 2010, 2011, maybe, in Ruislip, I think it was, in Middlesex, in the UK, which is on a greater London. For those that are outside of the UK, it's sort of on the outskirts of London. And he was calling himself J Love then, but it was still the same guy. And I went there because I was part of the development circle, and I'd heard about this guy, so I thought, well, I'll go along and check him out. And there must have been about 20 to 30 people in this small room, and they blacked out all the windows with tape and paper and everything like that. They switched out all the lights, and this young guy came in, sat down, and they had two small infrared lamps on, and he went into a trance, and supposedly a Native American guide was speaking through him. And then he said, I'll bring through the first person. And I was sitting in a seat, but there were people standing room only at a point, standing behind me, and you could hear them going, oh my God, look at that. Oh, wow, how fantastic. And I was looking as he moved his face into this lamp, and I thought, I can't see anything at all. There's nothing really happening apart from the shape of the shadows that, as you move under a red lamp, you're going to create some interesting, weird, kind of Hammer horror looking shadows or something. But there was nothing really outstanding happening that I could say was paranormal. And I felt really kind of thought, well, what's going on? And they still sort of went on, and he would move in and out of shadows, and people saying, look at the fingers, or look at the nose, or look at the ears, or something. And I thought, well, this is strange. Why can't I see this? And so they took a break, and he said, as the spirit guide, does anyone have any questions? And so I thought, well, okay, I'll ask. I said, yes, please. I said, can you bring anyone through? And he goes, yes. He goes, come forward, my child, So I sort of sat in the front row a bit more, and he invited me to hold his hands as, in trance. So I held his hands, and he stepped sort of back out the light, and then he moved his face back into the light again. And he said, I feel a male person around me. I went, oh, yeah. And I thought, I was waiting with anticipation, getting kind of excited. And I could again hear the people behind me going, oh, wow, look at that. The nose is getting bigger. The ears are getting bigger. Look at the lips. And I thought, well, this is really strange, I'll be honest. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't see anything happening. So he says, give us a minute. And he moves out the light. And then he comes back in again. And I looked, and you're feeling the pressure on you this time. You're thinking, well, I really should start seeing some thing. So he says, I'll try one more time. And you can almost feel this spirit guy is getting impatient with me. So he withdraws from the red light, then he comes back in again. And again, you're still seeing people going, oh my God, look at that transformation. There's nothing going on. Absolutely nothing as far as I was concerned. And I said, I'm really sorry. I just can't see a thing. So this spirit guide coming through Jason Harrington, or J Love as he called, turned to the who was organizing it, and he said, I forget her name, so-and-so, can you make sure our friend here gets a full refund? And she goes, yes, I will. And I paid like 20 pounds. After I never got off at all. No fun came. I've always joked that the spirit world owed me 20 pounds basically for a bad show. But I've been to sort of demonstrations of mediumship, of a physical mediumship. I went to a place in Oxfordshire, in Barry, where I saw some pretty bad practices going on. I'm not saying they do it there all the time. It's just one particular medium. And again, I mention it in my book, where they were doing strange voices of children. It sounded absolutely ridiculous. And they even had this idea where they would materialize a hand of a spirit coming out from under a curtain. And they invited everyone to queue up to go and shake the hands of this materialized spirit's hand as it came up the curtain. And the first guy that was there who was going to go out, they said, go out and shake the hand of the spirit. And he wanted to lift the curtain up, and they said, no. They kind of panicked. They went, no, don't lift the curtain up. And he went, oh, okay. So he had to leave the curtain where it was. And he shook hands with a spiritual hand that was coming out from underneath the base of the curtain. And once they were satisfied, I think, that was all working, they invited everyone to form a queue in this darkened seance room and go up one at a time and shake hands. So I got in the queue along with everyone. I went up, and I shook their hands, and it didn't feel clammy. It didn't feel wet. It felt like a normal person's hand. It had a body temperature to it and everything. And I thought, I feel this is fake. I'm absolutely certain it's fake. And like the guy at the beginning, I really wish I could have lifted up this curtain. And I thought, how can I prove it was fake if I ever came again? Because one of the things that led me to believe it was fake was that at the end of this seance, I started speaking to the medium's wife, and I'm cutting out a little bit here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Getting some signals coming through? Yeah. You still
Yeah,
got
I'm
me?
good.
Good. Okay. So at the end of the seance, I spoke to the medium's wife. Now, the medium, I was told, came from Ireland, and the medium's wife spoke with an Irish accent as well. And I said, when he was talking as Jonathan, the alleged spirit guide that was producing his hand, I said he sounded very much like the guy of Harry Potter who was the wizard, Professor Dumbledore, Richard Harris. He sounded like that kind of voice. And she goes, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why. And yet it was the guy who was Irish, and so was Richard Harris, you know. So I thought that's a bit suspicious. But the other thing is that the medium's brother had to be in the front row as well. And there was this manifestation of drums being played on this child's drum at the beginning of the seance because it was Christmas. And they were throwing out gifts for people by this Christmas tree. And they said the spirit children were throwing these gifts out. And I thought, well, maybe this brother could be a confederate, an accomplice or something like that, who could be literally picking up these presents, just throwing them out in the darkness and we all catch them. And then he could be playing the drums, you see, as well. So I was really, really suspicious of the whole thing. So I thought if I ever went back again, because they check you and frisk you when you go into these things, you can't take any recording devices, cameras, or anything like that. So you have to go in literally just as you are. I thought because I'm an artist, I could, in theory, put red oil paint over my finger, which takes a long time to dry, and I could put then an elastoplast plaster over it. As if I got an injury on my finger. And when I'm invited then to queue up to go and shake hands with this materialized spirit hand, I would unwrap this plaster because I've been frisked, and they would just see this plaster as an injury, and they wouldn't even consciously think about it. And I'd put my hands up, let myself get frisked, but I've still got my secret weapon, which is this plaster with the oil paint under it. So I'd get in the queue, and when it's my turn to go and shake hands with this spirit guide, I would peel off this plaster, and then I'll take this oil paint that's still wet and rub it all over this spirit guide's hand, you know. and then at the end of it, when they all go out into the other room to have tea and biscuits, I would look for the guy in the room that's got red paint over his hands, and I would go to him, caught you red-handed.
Literally red-handed. Good idea, Neil. Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Literally red-handed. Yeah.
I hired
That's my experience of physical mediumship. Go on, carry on. Yeah.
I was going to say I hired a psychic artist early on to see if she could paint Abby, and she came back with a portrait. Didn't look right to me, but basically she had gone to, this is over in your neck of the woods, she'd gone to the London Museum and she had copied one of the portraits there. And it just so happens that when I got online and Googled, apparently I Googled the same thing she did, because there's the portrait, you know, right there on Google, like the third page over, you know. So I told her, I said, look, if you'll refund my money, I won't say anything about it. So she did. She refunded my money, and that was the end of that. So there are frauds out there, you know, there's no question.
Yeah. That's the problem there. It's fraudulent mediumship. There's mediums that are not very good, and they shouldn't really be out there. And then there's a small cream of the crop mediums that are really exceedingly good. You don't really hear much about physical mediumship much these days. I think they want it to be a bit of a closed shop because they don't want to risk danger to the medium, I think, is their first responsibility.
Right.
And we know that Helen Duncan, the physical medium from World War II, was injured when she was raided, and they pulled the curtains apart and let physical light get to her, which made her ill, which ultimately led to her death, didn't it, Ben?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, in 1956, she performed her last seance in Nottingham, and there was a police raid in which they literally they burst in and basically switched on all the lights, the big main lights. And she received like second-degree burns to her chest and her neck. She was treated in hospital for this, but was treated for the burns. But it was a horrible shock for her. She never really got over it, and she went back to her home in Scotland. But literally a few weeks later, she died. And there's no doubt. I mean, she wasn't a well woman. She was very overweight. She had diabetes, all kinds of issues like that. And she may have lived a couple more years, but it's obvious she was never going to live to a ripe old age. But in my view, that police raid was as good as murder, because her death was a direct result, even though the coroner didn't say so. It was a direct result of that police raid.
Well, she got in trouble because she correctly predicted, as it were, a sinking of a ship. Is that correct? She got
yes, not predicted, but she reported on a sinking a ship that the government had decided to keep secret. It was called HMS Barham. This was an Admiral class battle cruiser. When Barham went down in the Mediterranean theatre, the government, it was such a disaster because this was one of the biggest, this was one of the most powerful ships the Royal Navy had. This was in 1941 when everyone was very, very uncertain about which way the war was going to go. The government said, we don't want to damage morale on the home front, so we won't report this in the news. And so there was an attempt to cover it up. Helen reported in her seance the fact that the Barham had gone down, and she was even talking to the dead sailors who'd been on the ship. That was when we know that Brigadier Roy Firebrace, the head of Army Intelligence in Scotland, specifically wrote a letter to the intelligence services saying that she should be spied on. They should have agents in the, and we know that if our side was watching her, you could be damn sure the enemy was as well. And when in 1944, when D-Day was being planned, they said we can't risk this sort of thing, especially when one of the landing ships sank in 1943. One of those landing boats with a ramp at the front. They were doing a drill off the coast of Dorset, and the whole thing went down. The whole ship went down, and 144 the troops who were on board drowned. And they were floating. They knew about D-Day. They were floating around in the spirit world. They could have come through Helen's seance any time, and it would only take one enemy agent in the room watching her, and then the whole D-Day thing would be blown. And they went to so much effort to try and keep that secret. They even spread disinformation that there was going to be an invasion through Italy. It was incredible. The James Bond guy, he was involved in that. Ian Fleming, he was involved in that.
Ian Fleming.
And he was involved in planning that. So they decided they had to lock her up. They had to put her in jail, and they didn't have any reason to put her in jail because she hadn't done anything warranted it. So they made her up. They made up a reason.
They should have at least put her into a hotel or something nice. They didn't have to put her in jail.
Yeah. Why didn't they just go to her and just pay her off? Pay her off and just say no practicing for the next few months, please.
Exactly.
We can't tell you why, but please, here's the Official Secrets Act. Just sign this. Here's money to compensate you. Just tell everyone you're going away on holiday for a few months. It would have been far. It would have been kinder, and it would have probably been less expensive than the bloody trial was. Yeah, I've been researching this in great detail. This whole
she was tried under the Witchcraft Act because they had nothing in place to try mediums at that particular point.
But this was an archaic law.
Her trial that actually led to the mediumship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain that, Ben. Explain that.
The 1735 Witchcraft Act had not even been used for over a century. This was an archaic law. The only reason it was on the statute books is no one could be bothered to get enough MPs together to repeal it. It was like a moribund law, and they just dusted this off and said, "We'll hit this because this has that maximum 9-month prison sentence, and we need her in jail for that long. So let's just dust this off and throw it at her at the Old Bailey." I'm sure she was in a courtroom alongside serial killers and spies and people like that who normally go to the Old Bailey. It's incredible. I mean, the Central Criminal Court of London she probably couldn't believe what she was doing there.
So do you think that chilled other mediums to kind of back off? And
I don't know if it actually had that effect, but it must certainly have had that. It must certainly have made people feel uncomfortable. Yeah, it must have. Whether they actually stood up and said "I don't care" or not, I don't know. But yeah, it's awful, isn't it? It was a terrible injustice.
When were the skull experiments? What era was that?
1994 to
So
I think 1997.
Yeah.
So they weren't afraid by that time, I guess. At least not of being imprisoned.
Well, no, absolutely not. I mean, the Fraudulent Mediums Act was repealed in 2008, but I mean, it was never. There's nothing illegal about the skull experiment. This was like a private event done by Robin Foy and his wife, and a couple of other people involved. Several people from the SPR. There was nothing wrong with that. I mean, really, there was no. It's as long as you'd use the entertainment purposes only thing. That disclaimer, you have no real problem with the law. It's a very easy. The Fraudulent Mediums Act from 1951 to 2008 was very, very easy to get around in that sense.
Now,
Do you think if there was a war now, if Britain? Go on.
No, go ahead. I was on a different track.
Yeah, you're going to ask a good question there, Neil.
Okay, I was going to say, do you think if there was a war now with Britain, with say, I don't know, Iran or whoever may be the flavour of the month that's our enemy, that we would end up kind of having to do a similar thing to mediums, like shutting them up or something like that. I mean, the trouble is there's much more of an audience out there now that would watch mediums online, whereas in Helen Duncan's time, the only outlet that she could give was through newspapers and that sort of thing. Whereas these days, everyone can self-publish their material online. They would perhaps cut them down if they don't want their war secrets betrayed in some way, and a spirit guide or someone's coming through a trance medium like David Thompson or someone in the UK, they may end up having to kind of shut them down or pay them off for a lot of money, just be quiet because they don't want their own secrets broken out again. It's possible, I'd say.
I'll answer. Yeah. Yeah. Well, look how during the I don't think you can say it on YouTube, but there was a disease a few years ago that spread across the world, and governments became very, very determined to try to protect people from that using very, very extreme authoritarianism. And look how they did. They said you're not allowed to talk about this on social media. You still can't mention the name of the disease on YouTube. And they went to very, very extreme, very, very jackboot type tactics they used to actually stop people disagreeing with them on various policies. I think in my own country, it wasn't so bad. I know in Australia, it was terrible. They were literally arresting pregnant women and dragging them into the streets and things like that. And so, yes, in an emergency situation, governments will they will take the gloves off, and they'll go balls to the wall if they have to, and they would, I think, in a wartime situation, especially when we're faced with a situation where there are state secrets, and that if you can't just kill them people because they know too much, like in the movies. If you can't silence people even by killing them, you have to take other means to prevent their message getting through. So the answer to your question, Neil, is definitely yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Now we get back to that film, The Astral City, as we almost come to a close here. They did refer to reincarnation in the film, where various souls in this astral city were sent on to other lives, and it was almost like a second death in the spirit world. This person would be waved goodbye, maybe choosing another life to go to, which is an interesting concept. So they explored quite a few kind of concepts within this film, within the story, which we encounter in other books as well. But even on the spiritual side of life, even in the spirit world, there's people over there, according to some reports, that don't believe that there's such a thing as reincarnation. There seems to be disagreement within the spirit world itself about whether people do incarnate or not. So I guess that's something to do, maybe, and Stephen, maybe you might want to come in on this, that maybe there is a kind of various levels or various beliefs within the spirit world that conflict with their own understanding of what they're experiencing there.
Well, again, as we talked about this, and I think that people tend to gravitate toward other people of similar beliefs on the other side. So, all the Catholics will get together, and the Protestants and the, whatever, and the atheists will all get together, and, and maybe the atheists may not believe in life after death over there. We don't know. We haven't talked to them, but it may be that they're convinced that that's another planet or something that somehow or other they've gotten to. So the people that don't believe in reincarnation would also kind of end up together and reinforce each other. But I was thinking about the film, and let's suppose that they're right and there's no reincarnation. So I was kind of thinking, so in the film, they have somebody kind of all dressed up and they're walking through some doors or something. I vaguely remember the person that's reincarnating, it's kind of a ceremony and they go through the doors. But maybe it's, the movie Soylent Green, where maybe it's a big surprise and there's actually no reincarnation and something's going to happen to them. But I'm kind of surprised when I see spiritualists that do believe in reincarnation. But what I find is they kind of have to keep it quiet, that they're not really supposed to say very much about it, and they're not really supposed to, now it's getting to where they can believe in it, but don't talk about it much. So and the main mediums you'll see, like John Edward and people like that kind of, when they're pushed on it, they'll say, yeah, I do, but they won't talk about it very long. So, as far as people on the other side, I think that Swedenborg did not believe in it. And the people he talked to over there apparently didn't. So there must be whole communities, unless they're humoring people. That's also a possibility. If they say, well, this guy's not ready for it, let's just pretend like we don't believe in it. That's possible. So I don't know the answer to it, except I'm convinced it does happen. And, you can stay over there for a pretty long time, apparently. Some people can. Some people come back very quickly. I was told in a reading that I have been coming back very fast. But some people could stay over there for what to us would be, 100 years or 200 years or 300 years. Abby hasn't come back, to my knowledge, and she died in 1841. So it's variable, and if somebody's been over there for a long time, they may just not anticipate ever having to go back.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the other side, but I do know.
Because you believe.
Sorry, Neil.
Go on, Ben.
I was going to say I can't speak for the other side, but I do know on this side that among spiritualists it is a contentious issue. And I mean, I went to a Greater World Church, and this isn't because I believe specifically in the Greater World doctrine. It's just it was the one closest to me, and they would never discuss that.
Interesting. I'll so just as we wrap up here, Stephen, you've done a book about reincarnation in your previous life, where you were Matthew Whittier, and your wife is not, as you mentioned, incarnated in the spirit world, who was called Abby. Now, there's a connection there because you've done this book where you've been using ChatGPT and other AI tools to help you try and unravel what you believe is not a forgery, but a case of stealing someone else's work, which is you believe that the original Scrooge story, A Christmas Carol, was done by your former self in another lifetime, Matthew Whittier and Abby, and you believe that the manuscript was either handed over to Charles Dickens, or I don't know how he got it, but then he rewrote it and forged it under his own name, that he was the author. And so you've gone now down this very methodical process, taking about 12 years, I understand it, to try and unravel this using ChatGPT to look at stuff. How did you work that? What was the basic principle of your method?
Well, I mean, I gradually became convinced of it because I kept discovering more and more of their writing, and I got their style and their worldview and so on. And I said, this is just one of their stories. And then I had to go in and investigate Charles Dickens' life. And I became convinced that he was actually an imposter, that he was not a great writer, and that all the greatness in all of his published works came from his victims and not from himself, that it was his modus operandi to take his ideas from other people and then jazz them up for the public. So I found a lot of evidence for that, and I wrote a very long paper. It's like 116 pages now, and I posted it. Of course, I couldn't get it published, and a lot of people read it, but nobody wanted to talk about it. And so last year, about middle of last year, I said, I've already been into Charles Dickens' handwritten manuscript. It's available online. The people that hold it here in New York City, the Morgan Library and Museum, put it online in 2011. And it's in very high resolution. It's zoomable, so you can get into each page. The whole thing is on there, and you can get into each page and zoom right in on individual words, So I said, I've been in it before, and I found some evidence in it. Matter of fact, Abby kind of led me to that evidence. But then I said, I think I want to transcribe the whole blasted manuscript. We're talking 66 pages. It's very sloppy. It's very difficult to read. There's a lot of redactions. Dickens, when he did redactions, they didn't have magic markers, so they couldn't black things out. But what he did was put corkscrews over the letters and go along those. In other words, really trying to hide what was there. And then if he really wanted to hide something, he'd heavily go back and ink it over, Well, I did two things. First off, ChatGPT got to the point where you could work with it like it was another scholar, like it was a scholarly mentor. You could show it things, you could give it large blocks of text, you could argue with it. And I would argue with it. I would show it. I would zoom in on these letters and I would send it to ChatGPT, upload it, and we would argue about what the letters were, for maybe an hour or whatever. And I got very familiar with Dickens' handwriting, and I got very familiar with the different methods to figure out what the letters were in the words. So I wanted to transcribe the whole thing. But then I also developed a software method. And Neil, you're probably aware of the levels function in graphics programs. So the levels function has the black level and the mid-tone and the white level, and it's all on a continuum, and you can grab it at any one of those 3 points. So what I learned to do was, first off, I'd enlarge one of these words, as much as possible. And then I'd take it and I'd take the mid-tone and I'd pull it way up until it was almost watermarked. It was very light. And you're starting to see details coming through. But you can't really see it too well because it's so pasty white. Then I'd take the black level and pull it up until I punched up the contrast until you could start to see those details that you'd revealed. And it acts like an X-ray machine. It's almost like you're looking through the redaction marks to the text that's underneath. So when I applied that technique and then I showed that to ChatGPT and we, brainstormed it, I was able to transcribe all but maybe 2% of that redacted material. So I created a transcript, and in the transcript, I've got certain keys so that all the redacted words are in brackets. If I extrapolate something that I know is there, but he didn't put there, I'll put it in parentheses. It's obviously what was meant to be there. If I don't quite understand it, I'll use a question mark. I use this kind of a code. I transcribed the whole manuscript and I found all kinds of evidence for Matthew and Abby's authorship under there, including a specific American words, American phrases that Dickens never used that were just American, like bee, like a quilting bee or a spelling bee that, to my understanding, was not British. That was an American term. Or, excuse me, or critter, which is an American colloquialism. And then there was one, allers, for always. So it was in the sentence that said where Mrs. Fezziwig is announced. She comes in and in came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. Well, I recognized that as Matthew's writing, but he had written as allers on the end of that. Allers meaning always. And I knew that Matthew Whittier had used that like 68 times before in this character that he created. And Dickens never used it. So we had that. Then after I sent you the first version of the book, I realized that let me go back in. I said, let me go back in and make sure that's not Cockney. Make sure that that's Yankee. Well, it's not anything. It's not anybody. Matthew made that up. He made up the word allers. So there's one of Matthew's own made up words hiding in A Christmas Carol. It's like his signature is in there. So that there's a whole bunch more. I mean, that's just barely scratching the surface. So that's the way I proved it. I said, let's get into that manuscript.
Well, I hope justice is done, Stephen.
Well, nobody pays any attention. Nobody believes me. So here we are back with, reincarnation with the spiritualists or life after death with the atheists. They just hope they'll go away if they ignore it long enough.
But what you have done, I think, at least you've put it down as a record, a testament to your research that you've done over the past 12 plus years, so that if someone maybe 30 years time has doubts about Charles Dickens themselves and thinks, this doesn't seem right, this doesn't read right to me, and they've found other evidence of Charles Dickens manufacturing other books or something, or stealing ideas, that your book stands there as a kind of an extra sort of strut of support, if you like, to that argument, and it's all in there in black and white, literally in black and white and high contrast.
It's all there, and
that you've got that now, as a book for people to use as a document to aid their own research as proof. If you just kind of wondered about it and never thought about it, your idea would disappear and it'd just be lost in time and no one would know about it. But now you've put it in some sort of format that it's there, even if not many people are discovering it at the moment, it's going to be there as a kind of a source of information for future scholars to look at.
I hope so, if enough copies survive. And the other thing is that as you know, the entire transcription is in the back as an appendix. So not only did I present the evidence that I found, but you can look yourself. You know, the other thing that's happening is kind of interesting. I have papers posted online, and not that many people are reading them. If they do read them, they don't want to talk to me about it. But the bots, the robots are scanning them. Well, right now, the robots aren't actually reading them. But according to a conversation I had with one of these AI systems, they're developing to the point where the robots will read the text that they're crawling, that they're scanning. And at the point that they start reading it, they will start evaluating it. And if they start evaluating my papers, then they will see that I've got a good argument, because I can convince an AI system, you know, give me 2 hours or even less sometimes, and I can convince them with that, because I keep giving them evidence. And finally, they, unlike a human person, they accept the logic, you know, of the evidence, and they start agreeing with me. See, so if these robots actually read the papers, they may start telling people themselves. You know, right now, if you get on a bot, it's hard to get them to even mention my name or mention my work. You have to really press them, but at some point they may start telling people.
Yes, I think it's a matter of time. Just keep these AI units or whatever they are will develop, and they will eventually they'll soak up all the information in all the world of everything, both positive, negative, whatever. But at least they got to soak it up to be used as opinions or information for someone somewhere. I mean, they still get it wrong at the minute, but I think those days will be numbered. Eventually, they'll get a grapple on everything. Any final closing words, Ben, before we wrap this show up?
It's just been really interesting to talk to Stephen and yourself about these subjects. I always really enjoy this issue. I'm very interested in this particular field of study, and I've got to go and watch the movie now. Definitely, you've really given me encouragement, despite all the spoilers. As I'm sure I will enjoy it.
I think I sent it to you in the link, actually. So I'll certainly put a link in our program description if anyone wants to try and find it on YouTube. Yeah. Any final words from you, Stephen, as well? Where can people find your book and your information that you've published?
Well, the first thing from our conversation is I really wish that I could experience physical mediumship. You know, I've wanted to for a long time. It's pretty hard to find, you know, but one of these days I really would like to have that experience. But as far as the book is concerned, the website for it is thesacredcarol.goldthread.com.
Excellent. Okay. And there's also your other website, which is about your previous self as Matthew Whittier, where you explore how that you discovered that information. And you've also got a film on as well. So do you want to tell us about the website if people are interested in your former life, and also the film that you've got online as well? I think it is about where you start to look into Matthew Whittier's life, and you talk about that as well.
Yeah, the website is IAL for In Another Life, but it's ial.goldthread.com. They're both subdomains. But the documentary I released in 2003. I started working on it in 1997, and it's about reincarnation. It's called In Another Life: Reincarnation in America. You can find it on YouTube, and it's basically how are people encountering reincarnation in America. So it's the different ways it goes through, one way and another way and another way. How are they learning about it? How are they encountering it? So that's the theme of it. And I mean, I had a very small budget. It took me 5 years to put it together. But I would say that given the budget size, I think it turned out pretty well. It's distributed to universities through Films Media Group. So it is used by professors occasionally.
Yeah, so you would. Yep.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for taking part in our program. And we hope that viewers will be interested to find out more, they can always go online. They can either join or subscribe to Gaia.com. And I think you can do that through Amazon Prime. So if you've got Amazon Prime, you can find the Gaia channel through Amazon Prime's subscriptions. And that's where you'll find this program, amongst others, called the Astral City. But also I found a very interesting show on there called The Flip Side, which is worth a look, because it's where this guy is a Hollywood guy, is making contact with his former friends that have passed over, and that includes Harry Dean Stanton and also the actor whose name escapes me. He was in Apollo 13, but he died, and he comes through a medium. In fact, he comes through 3 different mediums, and that's worth a watch as well, The Flip Side. But you can catch the film The Astral City on the Gaia channel, but you can also catch it on YouTube as well. So it should have subtitles. We'll put the captions on if you want to try and understand it. And you'll get an idea of what we've been talking about if you haven't already seen it. And then you can also find the books that I mentioned called Life in the Unseen World by Anthony Borgia. And you can find those online as well. In fact, you can find them online if you the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive, I think, will probably direct you to some published PDFs online about those. You can buy them as books off Amazon, but I do know they are published as PDF downloadable files as well, free of charge, of course. So that's worth a read. And you can make comparisons between those writings and the film. And you'll certainly find similar kind of themes that are covered in both. So that leads me to say thank you very much indeed to Ben and Stephen and yourselves for listening to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm Neil Ward, and I will bid you good evening. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.